Alright, so today we are kicking off the Imagine Block of the Month videos with month 1, and you may be asking yourself, what is the Imagine Block of the Month? And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put up a picture of it. This was the quilt top hanging at a show recently. It is actually currently being quilted as I film this and will be ready next week. But once it's quilted, we'll get a beautiful shot for all the videos going forward. So how did the Imagine Block of the Month get started, and where can you get this? There is a local quilt shop here called MulQueen Sewing Center. They have multiple shops here in Phoenix, and they have decided to do an Aurifil Thread Collector Box of the Month. So every month you will receive a box of Aurifil threads with 3 spools of 50 weight large spools of thread. They came to me and asked, could I create a block of the month to go with the Thread Collector Club? And I went back and said, sure, we'll do this block of the month quilt, which again you can see here. And in the meantime, not everybody likes applique, not everybody likes whimsy, so why don't we do a 2-in-1 pattern where they can make the block for the quilt and or they can make a secondary project. So for month 1, we're doing the big block Imagine at the top of the quilt, and then we're turning it also into a bench pillow. Other projects throughout the year, because the block of the month is a year-long program, you can sign up for 1 month or all 12 months. It's totally up to you. But some of the other projects is we're doing a tote bag with a beautiful daisy front, and then we're doing placemats, table runner, which are pretty common, but then we're also doing a vinyl project tote. We're doing zipper totes. We're doing a needle book. Gosh, a door hanger. There's tons. Anyway, well, there's 12. So, but those are the ones that come to mind right now. Oh, a journal cover. I'm really excited about that one. So anyway, for month 1, we're going to kick it off here today. I will put the link below or somewhere on the screen here where you can go to MulQueen's and sign up either for 1 month or all 12. It doesn't matter. They're doing it month to month. The first box is shipping in March. We have created SVG files for all the applique if you happen to have a Cricut, Silhouette, or a Brother Scan and Cut, as well as MulQueen's is digitizing the artwork for anybody who wants to do machine embroidery, or is it embroidery applique? I don't have an embroidery unit, so I don't understand all of that, but they are also doing that. So on your first pattern, when you flip over the back cover, there is the code where you can go and receive all of those items. So if you want to do machine embroidery, or if you want to cut it on a machine, we've got you covered with the files. That was a lot. All right, so again, for first month, we're going to do Imagine, which, hang on, I have it here on the table. We're going to do the Imagine block. This is the block for month 1 for the quilt. And then we also make in month 1 the checkerboard border that's going to go around the block. But you can't put that on the block until you do month 2. However, you will be putting the checkerboard border on for the bench pillow. So let me get everything set up and we will get started. All right, so we are ready to start our first block for the Imagine Block of the Month. We are going to run through how to do the block, and then at the end I will show you how to do the bench pillow. But I do want to go over how our patterns are set up, because they'll be set up the same throughout the year. On the cover, you'll see the picture of the block. It'll say Block Center. And then this is the bench pillow, so this is the 2-in-1 project. So this month we're making 1 block for our block of the month, and or you're making a bench pillow. You can decide which one you want to do. I used all solids and tonals through this, so it should be pretty easy to find colors if you don't like my colors. And we up here at the top will tell you what the box will tell you what the block center is and the pillow sizes are. On the back, we have the fabric requirements broken up again by block center or bench pillow. We have other items you will need, and we have the information about where you can download the SVG files if you want to cut your applique on either a Silhouette, Brother Scan and Cut, or Cricut. The SVG files, you just put them into the software for the cutting machine and you can cut your shapes on the machine. Then there's also digital embroidery files from MulQueen's. It'll be at the same address, and then any other information will be on that page. So if you think you need something or there's question, check that page first, and then you can reach out to either myself or MulQueens. Inside each pattern, we will have the cutting broken down by project. So this is the block center cutting, and then this is the bench pillow cutting. The first month I took it easy on you, where the block center and the pillow center are the same. The only difference is on the bench pillow, we're going to add a border and put it back on. Some months you will make the same block and incorporate it in something else, and then like for month 2, I know we did the blocks, and then I actually took the elements from the blocks and I created a vinyl project bag, so it doesn't look like the block. So it's not always a 1-for-1, but this month we're going easy on you. Once you get your cutting done, you're going to have all of your images on how to make the block assembly instructions. And then once you have finished going through those instructions, then we do the pillow assembly instructions. So just make sure whichever one you're doing, whether it's the block or the project, you're reading the correct set of instructions, because there are 2 sets in the pattern. And then after all of that, we have all of the templates full size and reversed and labeled. You're ready to go ahead and start tracing these onto Fusible Web if you're doing it the traditional method, which we're going to go over in this video, or if you're going to go cut them on your machines or do the machine embroidery. I'm going to let you do that on your own because I don't know how to do machine embroidery, for one. And 2, everybody has a different machine, so me showing you on a Cricut may not work on a Brother or a Silhouette, which I have not used. So with all of that, let's go through what you need to start today. You'll need your pattern and your beautiful threads from box 1. And you'll notice through the year, if you do this along with me the whole year, I did try to pick colors that are different, but also colors that would be popular that you may use. I threw some neutrals in there. We will also get some variegateds in a couple of the boxes. I'm really excited for everybody to see the individual threads. I will put a picture up here of the threads on a table. We just did a show and had them out, and you can see kind of, you know, a grouping of what they look like together and just how yummy they are. So you need your pattern and you need your threads. You'll need an ironing surface and an iron. I highly recommend a Sharpie ultra fine point marker. This is what it looks like. This is what the tip looks like. They're super easy to find. They're cheap. They come in lots of colors. But the line that you draw with this is the same thickness as your scissor blade. So when you go to cut out your pieces, you don't have to guess which side of the line to cut on. You just cut on the line and the scissors will make the line go away. So this, you will need a marking pen. If you don't have one of those, just make sure it is a permanent pen. A permanent marker. You do not want to use a ballpoint pen. You do not want to use kids' washout markers because they're going to smear all over your piece. You could use a pencil, but again, the lead will smear, so just be aware of it. It'll be on your hand. You don't want to touch the fabric and smear pencil on that. You will need a pair of scissors. You may need 2 pairs if you're really particular. You will need paper scissors to cut fusible web and fabric scissors to cut fabric. I am cutting the fusible web and putting it onto fabric and then cutting both together. So I use the same pair of scissors. Totally up to you. And you don't need scissors this big. Medium-sized scissors are probably a nice size because we have a lot of little curves to go around. You will need fusible web. You're going to need fusible web for, I think, every single block. There may be one block that's pieced. So I would recommend getting Heat and Bond Light and using it throughout the project, or whatever fusible web you choose to use. I would use it throughout the project because you don't want to have different weights going through your quilt. You want it to all drape nicely, and I know Heat and Bond Light will drape nicely in our quilt. So we have that. You will need the fabrics as listed on the pattern here. I don't know if MulQueens is doing fabric kits or not. You can reach out to them. Like I said, everything is nice solids and tonals. We're using a mix of Benertax and Kona solids for this one, so they should be pretty easy to find even if you didn't get a kit, or mix it up and make it your own colors. I would love to see that. Again, lots of different thread colors are coming, so you may or may not, if you vary your fabrics, you may or may not use these threads this month, but you might use them in a later month. All right, so let's get started. First things first is we have already cut a bunch of this on my Cricut cutter. I know I don't have a Brother Scan and Cut, but that's okay. They're all nice. And I got most of the letters cut, but I did save a few letters to show you guys here on the video. I needed to trace 3 more letters. I've already traced my I. I need to trace the G and the N on here. There we go. Helps to move your scissors off the board. And again, if you cannot, if things start shifting while you're tracing, you can always tape this to the back of the fusible web, or you could do a little staple in the corners. I've done enough of these, I can hold both and they don't tend to shift on me, but if you do see things sliding, just, you know, put a little piece of tape there to help hold them all together. And so I just start drawing, and I don't try to go all the way around the shape. You'll see I jump around, so wherever it is comfortable to trace is where I jump. And if, so just going around these letters. I know, I don't remember what I was going to say. And I'm just going to speed up this part where I'm tracing the letters, and then I will bring it back to show you how to fuse it on your fabric and get it cut out ready for applique. Alright, so we've got all our letters traced. You'll see here, like I made a little mistake. I just corrected it. And just remember which line you're cutting on, and if you're not sure, just scribble through it. You're never going to see this part of it, so it doesn't matter. Alright, so now that I've got all of these done, they're all going to go on the same color fabric, but I am going to make them a little more workable. I'm roughly cutting out the shape, and I'm keeping these 3 ganged up together. And then I'm just going to cut out my M here. And then I take all these little scraps, and I have a special drawer, and I throw the scraps in, so when I need a little piece, I have it. So there's a little fusible applique tip for you. I'm going to trim off the extra, and then we're ready to press it on the wrong side of the fabrics. Now that I have the fabric that I want to press my shapes on, the first thing I need to do is iron out all of these wrinkles. And this is going to be the same fusible technique for every month. But you want to get rid of those wrinkles, because then when you go to put your letters on, you don't want any wrinkles underneath the fusible web. So I do believe this is Kona Watermelon. On the pattern, I believe we just called it hot pink. We called it hot pink, but if anyone needs to go get this one, that's what it is. I thought it was one of the yummier colors. So now that I have my fabric, I put it right sides down, wrong side up. It's a solid, it doesn't matter on this one. And you want to make sure you read the directions of your fusible web and use the temperature on your iron that the fusible web calls for. Some of them can work poorly or just totally burn away if your iron is too hot or you leave it on the shapes too long. So just a couple of seconds, usually you can see it change a little bit of color, and then I stop, and what I do is I kind of peel up a corner and make sure that the glue is adhering to the fabric and not to the paper. If it's adhering to the paper, you just add more heat. Now I'm getting rid of that wrinkle right there. I'm going to put the M down. And there we go. We have all our letters down that we need to cut. The reason we leave them roughly cut out is because now when I cut on the line, I'll seal all those edges in glue. If I cut this out on the line, put it on the fabric, and then cut around again, you'll get frayed and strings and all kinds of weird stuff. So you always want to roughly cut them out, then iron them on the fabric, and then cut them out on the drawn line. So now that I have all my letters pressed and ready to go, I'm roughly cutting them apart because it makes it a little easier to handle them. And we're ready to cut on the line like I had said. So I'm not going to cut all of these on camera. I'm just going to cut this one. This one has the most curvy parts, so I'm going to show you because I want to talk a little bit about scissors and how if you've ever cut and you get rough edges or you have trouble cutting, there's some things I can point out to you that might make it a little easier. First of all, when you're using your scissors, make sure that you are cutting up in this part of the blade. If you keep this down here at the edge, you have less control. You have to control the whole thing of scissors. The whole thing, the whole scissor. If you start working up into the blade, you don't have to worry about the tip. You can control it much, much better. So you want to be cutting at the higher part of your scissors. And when you watch me cut this, you're going to see I rotate the piece and not the scissors. The scissor hand and scissor arm do not move. The piece moves into the blade. I rotate the piece and not the metal, and that, first of all, it's easier on your wrists. Second of all, you're going to get a much better, more accurate cut. And again, you want to use the right size scissor for the job. These are actually pretty big, and these are probably a little small, but if you need to control your scissor a little better, and here I'm going to get into a tight cut, so I'm going to get rid of all that fabric, and I'm actually going to come from the other direction. And you don't, nobody says you have to do this like an apple peel and it's all one piece. You can jump around to where you have the best control and just take your time, and again, use that upper part of the blade. So now we're back out here. I can use the big guys again. Or you could just buy a new pair of scissors. And you'll see I am just rotating. So those are my tips for cutting your letters. Same thing with the daisies. The daisies you definitely want to cut with the smaller pair of scissors. They're very detailed and there's a lot of little petals. And again, anytime you think the fabric's getting too big, just cut it off. Get rid of it. You're not trying to save it for anything. The goal is to get this cut as nice as you can. So I'm going to keep cutting out the letters, and then I'll be ready to start pressing these down on the background, and I will be right back. I have all my letters cut out and I'm ready to start putting them onto the background and ironing them down, and then we'll be ready to do the decorative stitch around the edge with all our pretty threads. So I've pressed my background and I've also pressed the center lines on here. There's a center line this way and a center line that way. I do like to position all of my pieces starting in the middle and working my way out. You can look at the placement drawing, and then I went ahead and I just drew my center lines onto the placement drawing because I'm a little bit ADD, but you really don't need to do that. You can just pull the paper off of these, and so I use a straight pin and I scratch the back, and then it becomes a crack and peel, and I can pull the paper away. You don't ever want to sit there and try to pull it from the edge if it's not like this one was loose. So this one I can just pull away, but if it's really tight and it doesn't want to come, don't use the edge because you'll fray your fabric. You want to take a straight pin, scratch and peel the back, and start in the middle and pull out, and that way you'll save your edges from being getting frayed. So you can either pull all the paper off or you can do it as you go. It's totally up to you. And so now I'm just going to start placing my letters down where I think they need to go. Just always make sure this one shouldn't be well, it could be for the daisies. You don't want anything a half inch, up to a half inch to the border, because if I were to put this here when I go to sew this into the quilt, it's going to get caught in the seam. You want to make sure this is at least a half inch from the outside border. So we've got, let's see, we have our A, and now we're working with words. So make sure that you spell the word right before you iron it, because it's really easy when you're putting these down to accidentally misspell something. And I'm doing it on this little tiny ironing board. Make sure you're on a nice ironing board when you're doing it so you can spread the whole thing out. There's my little eye with her heart. I really hope you guys enjoy this artwork. I had so much fun designing this quilt. It is truly a part of me that you guys all will get to share in. They don't usually, I work for a lot of companies and do a lot of designs, and very rarely does someone say, go ahead and make something that's you. And this is what I got to do with this one. So hopefully you guys will enjoy it as well. Alright, so we've got everything pressed down and ready to go. So the next step is to move over to the sewing machine, and we're going to do the blanket stitching. But I think for me, I'm going to leave it here for tonight, and we will pick it up back tomorrow morning, and I will show you how to finish all of the edges. Okay, so last night we set up our applique, we got it prepped, we got it on our background, and now we're going to go ahead and start stitching. And that's a little tip for you guys. I usually do prep my applique in the evening, but I don't actually start doing the edge stitching until the next day when I'm much more refreshed. But before we jump over to the sewing machine, I do want to share some tips with you about doing a blanket stitch. This first month we are just doing basic blanket stitch. We're not doing any fancy stitching yet. That'll be coming in future months. But I want to talk about why I picked the color threads I picked, and also how to set up your machine to do the blanket stitch. So, alright, so let's get started today. So let's go over what we did first yesterday. First, I didn't cover yesterday where I got the background size from. I did just follow the directions in the pattern, and I cut the rectangle for the background, the size listed there. I also went ahead and cut all of the strips for our borders later, so those are also cut. I apologize I didn't go over that in the beginning of the video, but you can just follow the cutting directions to cut the rectangle and borders. So last night we prepped our background, and we got all our pieces pressed down, and we're ready to do our edge stitching on this piece. For month one, we are just doing straight traditional blanket stitch on here. As we go through the year, we're going to be playing with some decorative stitches and different ways to finish it, so keep following along. And this one, we're going to match the colors to the fabric. So if you don't know what a blanket stitch looks like, it is this stitch right here around the center of the daisy, and on the edges it is just a traditional, sometimes people call them a buttonhole stitch. It's really, I think that's more regional. Some places call it one thing, some places call it another. But that is the stitch we're going to do on here. And so what I recommend is setting up your machine ahead of time to do this. And if you do not do blanket stitches very often, draw a little heart or a star or just a funky weird shape, iron it down on fabric, and practice on that before you jump over to this. So how I recommend you set up your sewing machine is, first of all, look for the blanket stitch. The blanket stitch looks like a straight line vertical, a straight line horizontal, straight line vertical, straight line horizontal. Everyone's machine has a different number for it. And you check your sewer's manual to see if you have one. Some machines do not have a blanket stitch, in which case you can use a zigzag stitch. Sometimes they have like a horizontal one that's like a blind hem stitch you could use, but you'll have to find a stitch you like to finish it if you don't have the blanket stitch. You want to have, if you have the feature, you want to have your needle in the down position when it stops. So every time your sewing machine stops, the needle would be in the down position. That will hold your piece in place so that it doesn't shift while you're rotating the piece, because you're going to be rotating this piece around and around. Then you need, this is the most important part, you need an open toe foot. Not even plastic. You want to be able to see the whole area. Your blanket stitch, you have to see the edge of the fabric and where that needle is. And if this has got plastic on it or it has metal on it and you can't see it, your blanket stitch is going to be all over the place. A lot of people say they struggle with finishing their edging, and I can tell you 9 times out of 10 they're not using an open toe foot. And if you have the open toe foot, it will come out much nicer. So this is a good investment. I use this a lot. Anytime I have to see where my needle is falling on a project, I pull this guy out instead of using my standard feet. So make sure you invest in an open toe foot, especially if you're going to be doing this whole project with us the entire year. So that's how I set up my sewing machine. So I have a Bernina, and I use the settings that are on there, factory settings that I think are 2.5 and 2.5. On each machine, you're going to want to play with your stitch width and your stitch length, and to see what you like. But that's a starting point for you if you have the 1, 2, 3 numbering on your machine. And I think that's everything you need to do for your sewing machine to set it up. Open toe foot, needle in the down position, blanket stitch, and check your width and length. So for this month, we picked these yummy colors. First of all, like I said earlier, this is a Kona watermelon. I think this is Kona school bus. And then this is a really pretty white on white daisy. You may have seen it when I held it up earlier. I don't like using plain white. I do like using a white on white if I can find one that fits the project. And in this case, we found 2. This one has daisies, and we're going to use that throughout the project. And then there's another one that has this really cute swirl, and that one will show up I think in 2 months, not next month, but the month after. Let's talk about Aurifil threads, why I love them, and why I picked the colors I did for this project, or for this month, I should say. First of all, I love Aurifil threads because they are very strong. They're made from long staple Egyptian cotton, which means that they're longer pieces twisted together to make your threads. They're less likely to break. One of my favorite things is they are an almost lint-free thread, which means the wear and tear on my sewing machine isn't as high as if you constantly are getting lint in your machine. And the third thing, which is probably my favorite thing, is that because it is long and it is thin and strong, when you go to fill a bobbin, you get a lot more thread on that bobbin and you don't have to change it as often. And I know that's a silly reason to love a thread, but that is why I love this thread. It also comes in amazing colors. I think there's 208 colors in the 50 weight thread. They also offer 40 weight thread, 28 weight thread, 12 weight thread, 80 weight thread, which if you do any hand applique or hand piecing, you need to use that thread. It just disappears. It's like butter. They do a 6-strand embroidery floss on a spool. It comes on this beautiful little wood spool. I use that for all of my needlework. I absolutely love their 6-strand embroidery floss, which you may or may not know about. And they also do a 12 weight wool thread if you do wool applique. So they have lots and lots of threads, but for this year and for this project, we will be using 50 weight thread throughout the year, and we will be using the very large spools, so you have lots to play with. And again, all the colors through the year are curated by myself. I made sure to add solids. I added some variegateds. I picked colors that were very, very popular that hopefully, even when the colors of fabrics change, these threads will still be very easy to use. A couple tips on your threads, whether it's Aurifil or other threads. Make sure, especially if you're here in Arizona, that they're in a cool, dry place. Make sure that they are out of the sun, because the sun will over time fade them. But the biggest thing is they'll dry them out faster and they will become brittle over a couple of years. I keep all of my threads in a thread cabinet with drawers that I can pull it out and see all my threads, but I can close the drawer and protect them from our very, very strong sun. So let's look at the piece and the colors. So first of all, like I mentioned earlier, this is Kona Watermelon. It's called Solid Hot Pink on our pattern. I kept our names on our pattern very generic in case you're using your own fabrics to make it a little easier for you. And then this was Kona School Bus. And then this is a white on white daisy. I think it's called Crazy Daisies. And again, I kept everything basic. I don't remember the color of the background though. I can look that up later. So what we did is, for the first month, I wanted to make sure we matched our colors, so I went with a hot pink for the watermelon. I went for a cheddar yellow for the center of the daisies, which you can see is a little bit lighter, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. And then I gave you white. Basically, anytime you're going to finish the edges on a white flower, anything white, if you want the threads to disappear and you don't want it to look funny, you want to use white, especially if you haven't done a lot of blanket stitching, because the more you do it, the better you get at it and it's easier. But if you do a very strong contrasty thread on this, it's going to show any little errors you make. So to start with, I like to use white on white. If you're doing any kind of applique with a character, an animal, or a person, or anything with white eyes, you definitely want to use white there. But later in the club, we will be playing with using different colored threads on white once we get into this and we get a little more practice under our belt. But for this month, we gave you white, which is also a very good basic thread to have in your arsenal. So when you go with our Aurifil, well, when you start with your Aurifil threads, one of the worst problems for threads is trying to find where it starts. You take a needle, you're trying to find the end. Well, with these big spools of Aurifil, I absolutely love, you just twist the bottom of the cap off, and there is the end of your thread. And then you put the cap back on. Now, I tend to loosen up the cap, so there's a little space between my thread and the cap, so that when I'm spooling off the spool, it will not get tangled or tight. You don't have to, but if you see you're having trouble with this, maybe loosening this will work. The other tip that I can give you is the end cap that you use should not be bigger than the spool of thread. So if you have a big plastic white disc holding your spool on, a lot of times in your sewing machine tools you have a little one. You want the cap to match the spool, so again the thread doesn't get caught up on it. So once you have your threads, if you want to audition threads for your fabric, or say you're using a different pink than me and you want to see what this will look like, do not put the spool down on the fabric to compare it. You want to pull one piece out and lay it on there to audition it. That will give you a much more accurate representation of what you're going to get stitching with the threads. So for this one, when you look at them together, let me zoom in here so you can see it a little better. If you look at this one's got a little more blue in it than this, but that is okay because when you put it out as one strand, it just disappears right into the edge. But so if I held the spool there, I'd be like, maybe not, but then when you hold the strand, it looks very, very nice. Same thing for the yellow. Now the yellow, let me slide this over so we can see it. This is a very orangey yellow. And I could have gone with an orangey yellow, but this yellow is one of my favorite colors because it goes with everything. So when you lay that on there, it just accents the orange and it looks really nice, but it also blends and disappears. Now that we've talked about the threads and the colors and what I picked, let's look at it up close so you can see what they look like stitched out. And you can see where that yellow just accents the orange. It gives you a little bit of interest, but yet at the same time it blends in. There's the white, so you cannot see any of my mistakes. I didn't make any. And then here is the watermelon, the pink on the watermelon, and you can see again it just gives, because it's a little bit bluer, it gives this nice little sheen to it. Now the other thing about this club that I did as I designed the quilt and we stitched it up is these colors will be used at different times throughout the quilt. So you will not get month 5 and have it using month 8 threads because you haven't gotten them yet. But you may get month 5 and I may refer back to month 1 and say, hey, you need the yellow or the white. And that was my whole plan, was to hopefully build this and show you how we can pull them out and use them at different times. And I'm going to show you different stitches. So I really hope you join us on this adventure. I am going to put the link below where you can sign up through MulQueens, and again, you're signing up for 1 month and then they'll reach out to you for the next month, so you don't have to make a whole year commitment. But if you do want this pattern, this is the only place it will be as long as the Aurifil Thread Collector Club is going on. Once the club has completed, I will make the pattern available to people who are not in the club. But we are going to do a video every month on this, because even if you're not following along with the club, I'll be giving you tips like I did on thread and on how to blanket stitch. So we definitely have some learning things in here, even if you're not doing the quilt, but I really hope you join us. Leave me a comment below and let me know what you think about the idea of an Aurifil Thread Collector Club. All right, so my little commercial in there. So now that we've got this all ready to go, I am going to go ahead, I'm going to set up my machine for blanket stitching with the threads, bring you over there and give you some tips on how to actually stitch these. And then once we're go through that, we're ready to pop our border and back on and be done. So let's get the sewing machine set up for you. Alright, so we're over here at the sewing machine. We have our open toe foot on. We have our hot pink thread loaded. We are ready to go. You will see here I rolled up the bulk of the piece so I can work on one piece at a time. And as I go, I will roll up this side and unroll that side. That way I'm not handling my piece over and over and over and making the pieces pop off. I have my needle in the down position, and the one thing I didn't mention is for all my colored threads when I'm doing a blanket stitch, I actually just use this gray, this pearl gray. It is 2615, and I put this in the bobbin and then put just the colors on top. If your tension is correct on your sewing machine, which it should be if you're sewing, you will not see the gray come up. The only time I don't use gray in the bottom is like if I'm doing something there's a bunch of different yellows and oranges, the whole project is like all the same hue, I'll fill one bobbin of the medium tone for everything. Or if I'm using white or black, I always use white or black in the bobbin, especially white, because the little gray can come up and just kind of make it look dirty. So we do use white for white, black for black. light gray for most of the colors if it's a multicolor project, and if it's one project of the like all blues and greens and purples, I would probably pick like a medium blue and use it for both green, purple, and blue, just so that it's a little closer in tone. All right, so we're ready to start here, and now I have the camera set up between me and the machine, so if it wobbles a little, I'm doing my best not to touch it, but we'll see how that goes. All right, so I hand crank my needle down and I make sure we're at the beginning of the stitch, because this needle will go back and forth. You want to make sure we're all the way on the edge of the fabric. The straight part of the stitch is going to go into the background, and the horizontal bars will catch the applique. And because we're using a contrasting color, if we go on the background, it's going to be obvious, so you really want to keep it so it just rides along the edge. And if you haven't done this, go very slow. You can turn, on some machines, you can turn down your speed. And so we're just going to go ahead and get started here. I am using, there is a center line on my foot right there. Let me use the little pointy thing here. It's right here, and I have that aligned with the edge of my fabric. So this pointy thing is what I'm watching. I'm not really watching the needle so much, because the needle's going to go where it wants. As long as I can keep that straight edge along the edge of the fabric, we are doing well. All right, so as we go around a curve, you're gonna see I slow down, I stop, I move the fabric a little, and I slow down again, and I pivot again. And now we're back on a straight run, so I can go a little bit faster. All right, and now we're gonna go around this tight curve, and again, you're gonna see I stop, I pivot, I stop, and I pivot. Okay, now we're coming up onto this circle, and I want to show you how we do that. First, we're going to have a tight V. So when I do these tight V's, I go as close as I can, even if it's into the fabric. And then I literally just rotate around. I don't try to get one going that way. I just go all the way around, and I'll show you that up close when I finish the letter. I just go around, because trying to hit that V and do a horizontal line into the fabric is very, very challenging. And if it doesn't look right, if you don't do it right, it doesn't look right. So I just skip the whole process, because this little tiny area is so many, you're never gonna see it if you don't do it. But if you do make a mistake, you can see it. So that's my logic there. So I'm just going to work my way around, and again, you see, the smaller the circle, the more you have to stop and pivot. Okay, and this is going to be the blanket stitching tutorial for the whole quilt, because each month from here on out, we will have a bonus project, and the video will be mostly about the bonus project. So make sure to keep this one bookmarked and come back to it as you need it throughout the project, because it's the same technique for every blanket stitched applique. Okay, so now we're coming up to the edge of the daisy, and we don't want to go over it, so we go slow, and then just as we stop, I have the knot stitch, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. And that's it. That is blanket stitching for the letters. Okay, so we're back over here. We've got our Imagine blocks all pressed down and all the edges are sewn. So one of these is all ready to go for my quilt for block when we finish block 2. So I can go ahead and just fold this guy up and put him in. I recommend a container to keep all your blocks through the year in. And I'm going to slip this in one of those, and as we pile up our blocks, I will have them all in one little container. So that is done till next month. Now this one we're going to turn into our bench pillow. And the other part of block 1 for the quilt is we need to make our checkerboard border. We are not attaching it to the Imagine block, but we are going to make it so it's ready to go for block 2 next month. So I'm going to show you how to do the checkerboard border for the quilt and for our bunch pillow. So this guy we can just set aside for now until I get the checkerboard border sewn. Okay, so to do the checkerboard border, the technique is the same for both the pillow and the quilt. The difference is how many units you put in your borders. So first things first is you're going to have cut all of your yellow and purple strips or whatever colors you're using for your checkerboard. You will need 3 of each to do the border on the block 1 and 2 next month, or you'll need 2 of each to do the bench pillow. All of this again is in the instructions, so if I've lost you, don't worry about it. So once you have these, you're going to go ahead and sew these into strip sets, which I have gone ahead and done. So I have 3 for my quilt block, for the borders on the quilt block, and I have 2 for the bench pillow. And you're going to, again, do everything the same. If you're doing both projects, you'll just need 5 strip sets. If you're just doing one or the other, just look at what one you need. Once I have these all done, and to sew these together, I did use the yellow that came in this month's box to piece these together because it is the lighter of the 2 colors. And if you see anything, it'll blend into the yellow. To be totally transparent, a lot of times I will just piece with the same light gray I showed you for my bobbin work when I do the blanket stitch, but when I have the colors, I will match it to the lighter of the 2 colors for piecing. It just makes your piecing look a little bit nicer if for some reason it gets tight and you can see your stitching. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to flip over to cut these. Now I like to cut layers. If you are new to cutting or new to quilting and you do not want to screw this up, I recommend cutting them one at a time. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay them right sides together with opposite colors and opposite colors. And then what I end up doing is then carefully folding this in half. And we're going to square up the one end. You do want to make sure everything is aligned if you do this. Again, this is if you're an experienced cutter or you are a risk taker, go ahead and cut these 4 layers up. So now these are 2 strips. That's what we need for our bench pillow border. So let me see, how many of these do we need to cut? And we need to cut 28 for the bench pillow. So I have 4 layers, so I need 28 divided by 4 is 7, so I need to make 7 cuts here. So first things first is I'm going to square this up at the end. You don't know why this is so disparaging. I may have already cut a square off of this, but we're going to just go ahead and cut it and get it going. And we're going to clean it up. So you always square up with the bulk of the fabric to the left and the cutting on the right, and then once you've squared it up, you can go ahead and flip this over, keeping everything nice and neat, and then you're going to go ahead and start cutting 2.5 inch strips. And I like to use a horizontal line on my ruler on the sewn line and then match up the vertical. So we need to make 7 of these. 10, and then each one to make 11 will get 1 and 1. So now that they're all stacked up, I can take them over to the sewing machine, and I know not to like join certain ones, and I know each of these is a border, and that is what we're going to do to make the pillow border. Okay, so we have both of these done, and now I have pieced the 2 sides for the quilt block, and then these are super long because they're going to incorporate this and the 2 block 2s next month. So all we need to do this month is piece them, and then we are going to put all of this aside until next month, and I will show you how to finish this block right here. Okay, so we have our 2 short sides to go on either side of the block. And then we have the long pieces for top and bottom, and we want to make sure that we match. If this is purple here, this is yellow, and I'm actually going to look at the photo. What did we do in that corner? Just did this. It doesn't matter, I'm just matching the picture. So there we go, and then on this side you're going to do the purple so that it matches up with the yellow. So that's really the biggest trick here, is to match them up. But first things first is we're going to put our side borders on and then our top and bottom. And I'm going to go ahead and do all of them, but I wanted to let you know that I highly recommend pinning borders on, because your machine can pull the top and bottom pieces through at a different speed, and it's much better to have pins so you don't have fabric gather. Now in this case, it looks like I could have sewed this seam a little bit. This one looks a little off, so I am going to fix that before I sew it. But you also want to say, if this is the smaller piece and this one's a little bigger, you could sew it with the smaller piece on top and the bigger piece on the bottom, and that same reason we're pinning, so it doesn't absorb it, will absorb some of it. So it can work for you or against you. But if you run into this issue where this is a little bit bigger, I can see right there that this is not a 1/4 inch, so I'm going to go back over and just fix that one, and let's see how the other one is, and then I'm going to go ahead and get this sewn together so I can show you how to put the back on and we can move on. So let me get that on and I will be right back. All right, here it is. It's a little big for my cutting table, but this is the front of our pillow, so I don't know if I hold it up if that's any better. So there it is. This is what it looks like. And now all I'm going to do is put the back on. And when I went to cut my back for my pillow, I accidentally cut it too short. And instead of going out and buying more fabric, I just stole a purple, extra purple strip from the fabric and sewed it right down the middle. So now I have just a little accent stripe on my back. I would say that was a happy accident, and I'm really glad that it worked out, because I didn't want to go back and get more fabric. So when you go to put your back on your front, you want to lay it on there. You're just going to pin or wonder clip around. This is so big, it might be better to use wonder clips like these, so that you're not poking yourself with needles, but straight pins work as well. And you want to pay attention to the direction of your pillow, so that this is the bottom of the pillow, and I would leave, let me lay this back open, I would leave about that much open, and you're going to stuff the pillow with polyfill. There is not a pillow form that I'm aware of that would work for this, otherwise we would have done a different kind of a back. But this one is going to be stuffed with polyfill. It is going to take 1 to 2 bags to fill it. It is a big stuffed pillow, and then we are done with our bench pillow. So what I'm going to do here is, we did make one already. It's at the MulQueen Sewing Center, so you can go see it, but I'm going to put a picture here of it out on a bench. It looks so sweet and fun, and I hope that it inspires you as much as it inspired me to make it. And I hope you have enjoyed month 1 of the Aurifil Thread Collectors Club, Imagine, Block 1, and Bench Pillow. So as always, I want to thank you for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe and ring the bell so you're notified each time I drop another video. We do all kinds of things on this channel, unboxings, tutorials, and obviously sew-alongs with Block of the Months. And if you are interested in joining the Aurifil Thread Collector Club, I'm going to leave the information here. If you want to join and you have any trouble connecting with MulQueens, you can certainly leave me a comment below and I can get in touch with you and hook you up with them. I hope that you join us on this 12-month adventure. I am so excited to be building the quilt, showing you a different project each month. And again, if you don't follow along with the club, you'll still learn lots of tips, so make sure you check it out each month as we air the videos. They should go out on the 3rd Saturday of each month. So next month we're going to be doing 2 of block 2s, putting on each end of block 1 and finishing with our checkerboard border we made. And then we are going to go on, and I'm going to teach you a quick and easy way to put a zipper in while we make a vinyl project tote. So make sure to join me, and once again, thanks for watching. See you next time.